Here's something that might surprise you. Scientists have discovered that love and hate activate the exact same regions in our brains, which explains why that person you claim to despise keeps popping into your thoughts at 2 a.m.
That's fascinating, and it explains so much about those complicated relationships where people say they hate someone but can't stop thinking about them.
Let me share what neuroscience tells us about this. When researchers conducted fMRI studies, they found something remarkable. The putamen and insular regions light up identically, whether you're looking at someone you love or someone you hate.
So you're telling me our brains literally can't tell the difference between these intense emotions?
Well, it goes even deeper than that. When someone triggers emotional highs and lows in us, our brains release dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. That's why being around someone who frustrates you can become almost addictive.
That explains why some people keep going back to relationships that seem toxic from the outside. But is this just about brain chemistry?
Oh no, there's actually a fascinating evolutionary component at play here. For thousands of generations, survival often depended on choosing mates who could provide protection and resources. And those traits often came packaged with dominance and even some degree of emotional unavailability.
That's really making me think about modern dating patterns in a whole new way.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. There's something called the scarcity effect. Our brains are wired to place higher value on things that are harder to obtain. So when someone is emotionally unavailable or challenging, they inadvertently trigger this ancient value assessment system.
So you're saying that playing hard to get actually works because of our evolutionary programming?
Exactly right. And quantum mechanics adds another fascinating layer to this. There's this principle that what we resist, we often end up attracting. The more energy we put into pushing something away, the stronger that connection becomes.
That's making me think about all those times people say they hate someone but can't stop talking about them.
And this brings us to Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self. Sometimes the qualities we claim to hate in others are actually aspects of ourselves that we've repressed or haven't fully accepted.
Could you explain more about how that works in practice?
Think about it this way. If someone says they hate how confident or assertive another person is, they might actually be frustrated with their own inability to express those qualities. It's called psychological projection, and research shows it's one of the most powerful unconscious mechanisms in our relationships.
That's really making me think about my own reactions to certain people. How can we tell if we're projecting versus having a genuine dislike?
The key is to pay attention to the intensity of your reaction. Studies in behavioral psychology show that if someone triggers an unusually strong emotional response in you, especially if it seems disproportionate to the situation, that's often a sign that projection is at play.
So what can people actually do with all this information?
Well, research in metacognition, basically thinking about your thinking, suggests that the first step is developing awareness. When you find yourself having a strong reaction to someone, pause and ask yourself, what's really triggering me here? What might this person represent that I'm struggling with?
That kind of self-reflection must take a lot of courage and honesty.
It does. But studies in neuroplasticity show that this kind of conscious awareness actually creates new neural pathways. The more you practice this awareness, the easier it becomes to recognize and redirect those patterns.
I'm wondering how this knowledge might change the way people approach relationships in general.
Recent research in relationship psychology suggests that understanding these mechanisms can reduce toxic relationship patterns by up to 60%. When people understand why they are drawn to certain types of partners, they are more likely to make conscious choices rather than following unconscious patterns.
That's really empowering. It's like having a roadmap for navigating our emotional responses.
And what's particularly fascinating is how these patterns show up across different cultures. Anthropological studies have found these same attraction-aversion dynamics in societies worldwide, suggesting these are deeply ingrained human experiences.
That's making me think about how this knowledge could change the way we teach young people about relationships.
Exactly. Recent studies in educational psychology show that when people understand the science behind their attraction patterns, they're 40% more likely to make healthier relationship choices. It's about moving from unconscious reactions to conscious decisions.
And potentially saving a lot of people from repeating destructive patterns.
The data certainly supports that. Research shows that people who understand these psychological mechanisms are 3 times more likely to break free from toxic relationship cycles. Because when you understand the science behind these attraction patterns, you're no longer at their mercy.